Greetings and welcome back to my channel. What is it, the 17th? Yes, the 17th of January, 2023. And it is still the third decade of the 21st century. If, for some reason, at this point in time, you are brand new to my channel, I always like to point out that it is not only the 21st century, but the third decade of the 21st century. I do that as if to invisibly point out where people had once predicted us being as an evolved progressive society and then compare it to where we are. In some ways we may have exceeded expectations, and in other ways I think it's remarkable some of the things we're talking about. Now on my channel I sometimes cross lines between geeky and nerdier stuff, getting a little meta, to being a little more socio-political. Also, what I like to do is what I call the read, react, and respond videos. One of my loyal viewers, Stace, hope you had a good new year and everything, is the one loyal viewer I have that does take the time to respond. And again, if you're new to my channel, Stace and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything. We differ on probably a great many things. But the one thing I'd like to think we both agree on, without getting Stace to confirm this, is we need to have these conversations. We need to be able to cross these lines and talk to one another and explore different ideas and be able to have conversations with people we disagree with, because the alternative is we basically fall back to our echo chamber, surround ourselves with people who we think and act like, and then we start to demonize and dehumanize others. So without further ado, as always, I like to read, react, and respond to anybody's feedback. So without further ado, Stace Catalan. Coming from Tuesday, January 10th. I agree that Firefly is good in the sense that some storylines that Joss was planning wasn't able to do. He was planning a SA storyline with Inara. I apologize, Stace, I'm not tracking SA. Maybe you can explain if that's a shorthand for something. I never watched Chuck. I actually saw Firefly before Serenity, and I actually enjoyed the movie a little more than the series, mainly because it can stand alone as it is. You know, Stace, yeah, when it comes to somebody's individual opinion about entertainment, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, just your feelings and my feelings. I did not see Firefly originally. Even when I was in the service, apparently they had put the DVD box set of Firefly on board naval vessels, and when Firefly was probably in that stage on being on DVD, I was no longer getting on ship as much as I was being sent directly overseas to Iraq or Afghanistan. I stumbled into Firefly because of the special features off of Serenity, which I was aware of because of Nathan Fillion. Chuck, I don't know much about your background, Stace, but I think you'd really enjoy Chuck. The downside is I don't know that the entire series is streaming online anymore for free. So like if you have Amazon Prime or another streaming service, I don't know if Chuck is still on there for free. I don't know if these streaming services have like an age limit, like if a property is so old they'll remove it. You might actually enjoy Chuck just because of some of the more geekier, nerdy storylines, concepts, you know, things in the background. If you're not familiar, just try to imagine Chuck was more or less a spin on an individual who works at the Geek Squad for Best Buy. So instead of Geek Squad, it's the Nerd Herd, and instead of Best Buy, it's Buy More. And I won't go any further. I'd hate to spoil it for you. If you and your husband are geeky and nerdy like me and my wife, I think you'd really like Chuck, and I'd be more than happy to nerd out with you on that. But I also posted some other socio-political stuff, so to speak, kind of like a rant, if you will, and Stace, you took the time to watch and respond. And this was your response. As far as ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum, I believe that there has been an evolution in the criteria that needs to be met in order to get a diagnosis. I think that may be why there is an increase in diagnosis and medication. Also with medication and brain chemistry, different things work differently on different persons. I think our generation is a little split because one, location, and two, type of childhood. I believe some children that had parents that never divorced were probably raised differently than those that were children of divorce. There was an increase of single parenting within our generation as well, in my opinion. Something that is also starting to get more traction is a better understanding of how trauma affects people. I'm a child of divorce and had a traumatic childhood. I am very self-reliant, other than the times I'm ill. I would rather get a crutch to use as a height device to get something off of a high shelf than to ask my hubby to get it for me. My opinion is that it is still rough to generalize later generations on wanting everything done for them because of too many factors. You know, Stace, I'm not going to go against anything you said because we're two different people observing the world in two different ways. You know, and then we're, as a result of that observation, because we're two different people, we are going to observe it differently, we're going to receive it differently, and we're going to process it differently. What I'm seeing from my perspective is, I understand everything you said. For the most part, I was a second award stepchild, and it doesn't really show up that well, but I'm a redhead at that. So, all jokes aside, my first stepdad was not very good. I think it was all stereotypes, you know, you can think of. Not your kid, not wanting to be the father of somebody's kid, etc. That lasted for maybe a year before my mom left him, and then my mom was back on the market. In retrospect, it probably wasn't that very long. As a kid, it felt like forever. When you're in single digits, a year is a year. And it's all of a year, and every day is long, every week is longer, every month is twice as long, every year is 3 times as long. Whereas now at our age, you blink and it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, it's what? It's 2023. It's what? It's 2023. Yeah, I finished my second bachelor's in 2019. Haven't used it yet, but I have it. Anyways, the way that I see the world is, like you, my upbringing wasn't fantastic. I never try to play the pity party because I've also witnessed people that have had it worse than me. I grew up with people that had it worse than me. And that whole nature versus nurture, I think it's a combination of both, as well as a third element, which is individuality. I could bitch and moan, and I could spin a tale of woe on how I'm the product of my upbringing and circumstances, or I can take responsibility for my own actions, and I can take responsibility for myself, and I can be my own person. My daughter and I were having this conversation, and I'm going to try to stay on topic while I delve to the side a little bit. Last week, I was spending some quality time with my daughter, who's a senior in high school, and the way that the conversation was flowing, I eventually got to the point where I told her, I was like, hey, you know, as much as I try to teach you right from wrong, and as much as I try to make you a self-reliant, productive member of society who can fend for themselves, not everything is taught by me. You know, at the end of the day, you're going to be your own person, and you're going to find inspiration and influence from all kinds of sources. And I was telling her that some of my conduct and behaviors, I think I honestly got from television and movies. As far as if I saw something on TV or in a movie that I thought exemplified gentlemanly conduct or appropriate and proper behavior, I tried to emulate that. That doesn't go over very well when people are commenting on your behavior. So it's so much easier to say upbringing. It's so much easier to say that's how I was raised. But quite frankly, that's not how I was raised. I was not raised to call every person sir or ma'am. I was not raised to do the hard yes, the hard no, versus yeah, nah, no. You know, I was not raised to use slang or not, or to not use slang. To me, I picked up on it from other sources of inspiration, and quite frankly, possibly TV and movies. So that whole nature versus nurture argument, I don't know if television and movies would be considered nature, or if that'd be considered nurture, or somewhere in between. So that being said, when I observe the world, my personal observation, the way that I'm processing everything, is that you and I, and possibly people older than us, as well as people younger than us, for reasons I can't quite explain, for some reason our children's affection was very important to us, and we looked back on our childhood and saw some things we didn't like, not realizing that there may have been some intrinsic value in those things. And I feel like, without wanting to, without malice, without evil in our hearts, we may have overparented our kids. And I say that because, quite frankly, you and I both are old enough to be the parents of some of these individuals that have done 4 years in the service and are now getting out. It may seem weird to say, but if you actually stop and do the math, if you consider college age to be inappropriate, if you think that it's perhaps inappropriate to have a child during those college years, 18 to 24, then even then, you and I are old enough to have kids that are old enough to have graduated high school, either gone to college for 4 years and graduated, or joined the military for 4 years, completed their contract, and gotten out. So quite frankly, I'm seeing a lot of younger people that are in some way, shape, or form the age demographic of our peers' kids. And you'd have to understand my disposition to sort of see it my way, but that would also mean I'm trying to convince you to see things my way as though I'm right, and I don't want to do that. A lot of what I end up dealing with is, and this is just me as an individual, so I tell these students in class, I was like, look, I do not receive applications. Therefore, if I don't receive them, I am not going to approve or disapprove. I am also not going to assign a value or a dollar amount if such a thing exists for the benefit or service you're applying for. And I thought I made that pretty clear, but I still get individuals who come in, and the general impression I get is that they want us to do everything for them. And I often wonder, instead of blaming them for being lazy or blaming them for being ignorant, because technically if you look at the word ignorant, while it kind of has a very demeaning and negative virtue associated with it, in all technical aspects, the term ignorant basically means uninformed, uneducated, lacking in knowledge, lacking in understanding. I think what it really is these individuals that come through my office or come up to me during breaks or come up to me at the end of class, perhaps there's just a lack of understanding because of their upbringing, that in spite of their parents' best efforts to make a functioning adult, they didn't mean to, but they inadvertently deprived them of certain skills. And that's what I feel like's happening when I deal with all these individuals, is that when they're coming to me, they appear to be very lazy. They appear to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not incoherent, but they want somebody to do everything for them, or they want someone to tell them exactly what to do. And as much as I try, what they don't seem to understand is that's not what we do. Contractually speaking, in our contract obligations, we are not allowed to tell anybody what to do, period. In any kind of context whatsoever. We cannot tell them what to do. These are their individual benefits or services. They have to apply for them based on their own research. And quite frankly, the two areas that really seem to, three if you want to get technical, everybody wants to know about disability. And quite frankly, all we can tell them is how the disability process works. We can't tell them what to apply for. We can't tell them what conditions. We can't tell them how to perform at the exams. None of that. The other one is education, because after the legislation was passed, sometime after the events of 9/11, you have the Montgomery GI Bill, which is one that you pay for out of pocket, only for the first year in service. And then you have the post 9/11 GI Bill. They are two totally different bills, and they function differently as well. Due to how things have changed in the service, the overwhelming majority of individuals have no idea which one they have. So you have to explain to them, well, if you served after September 10th, 2001, you have the post 9/11 just for serving. And then, if need be, you have to explain to them some of the provisions and the conditions that go along with that. The trickier one is the Montgomery, because it's a deduction from their pay. And then you have to explain to them how they have to track down this information. And then once all that's figured out, well, which one should I pick? I can't tell you that. And that becomes very frustrating. And then the other one is healthcare. Well, what should I do? And it's like, if you want it, apply for it. Well, what about this? Long story short is this. On the healthcare application, there's 3 questions. Technically, there's 4. 3 of which only matter to the individual service member. Do you have a disability rating of this or higher? Do you have a disability rating of this, and this, lower than, basically, are you 50% or higher? Are you 40% or lower? Are you not disabled and receiving disability pay? And then the last one is pension. Pension's usually for widows or surviving dependents. So I tell them, I was like, you know, everything you put on that application can have an effect on whether you get approved for VA healthcare. And I was like, to the best of my knowledge, the VA is not in the business of trying to turn people away. So they always try to ask me, well, what should I do? And I was like, well, I can't tell you what to do. If you think it's in your best interest to do a disability claim, wait for your findings to come back so you can answer that question. That's a personal decision. If you think you need health care sooner than later, then you may want to apply for it sooner than later, regardless of your disability. So those are the sort of things I run into. And the biggest problem I have is they want definitive answers. They want someone to tell them exactly what to do, and that's not what I do, and that becomes problematic. And then, as I said before in the previous video, so I can get this out at about 20 minutes, my wife subbed for a number of years within the school district, mostly at the same school. She did a couple other schools, but she was more or less like the go-to sub for one school in particular, specifically with the exceptional needs kids. Some of them are straight up exceptional needs. And exceptional needs may have come a long way from where it was when you and I were younger. But at the same time, I think some of that old school needs to be brought back. And Stace, I don't know if you had this growing up in your state. Where I grew up in Illinois, we did have a separate classroom for, as best as I know, we called them BD. Behavioral disorders. That may have a significant negative connotation to it. It may carry with it some emotional weight, but the children that could not behave in class had their own classroom to go to so that they could at least attempt to get some form of education, whether it was elementary, junior high, or high school. And some of the things I hear from my wife is that some of these kids, they can read and write. They can, you know, add and subtract. They can follow a course curriculum. It's just some of them, in her opinion, have discipline disorders because there's been no consequence. Now, my argument is not contrary to yours, and I know I'm going to go over 20 minutes, but I apologize. My argument is not necessarily to contradict yours or to combat yours. I think for every legitimate diagnosis that needs to be made, I look at it like this. We've made tremendous strides in a positive direction when it comes to mental health and all things under that umbrella, to include ADD and ADHD and all of that stuff. And I'm with you 100%. Individuals' brain chemistry. No one person reacts and responds the same way to medication as somebody else. You know, that's why they call medicine a practice. I'm with you 100%. I get that. I often wonder where the old and the new need to find a way to coexist, where somebody who does have a diagnosis can still be disciplined so that at some degree their mind can start to do the math: actions, consequence, action, reaction, actions, consequence, action, reaction, so on and so forth, so that it doesn't reinforce bad behavior. I think there's some logic to where that could happen. And then, of course, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think there's also been a weird trend of potential parents who think that there's something sexy or there's something niche or there's something trendy about having their kids diagnosed with something. And I think that's plausible. And you sound like somebody who studied human mannerisms and human behavior. I kind of get that vibe from you. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility, that there are parents who just, rather than discipline their kids, rather than take some responsibility, they want their kids diagnosed. They want their kids to have a condition so that they can claim it or something. I could be wrong, but I don't know. Me personally, I think there's room for both. I think, yes, we've made strides. We've improved upon things, so maybe that's also caused an increase in diagnoses. I agree that medication can be fickle and it can be very difficult to dial in medication for an individual. I also believe that discipline can be a big part of that. That all things can be equal at the same time. And in conjunction with that, I think discipline. And I don't mean beating the living crap out of somebody, but I mean, you even responded to one of my videos where you said you got a whooping, I think, once, and that was enough for you to go, that was not fun. That was unpleasant. I do not wish to repeat that. That sucked. And it seemed to work. You know, unfortunately, I'm sure there's thousands upon thousands of studies that have demonstrated where that level of discipline didn't work. You know, parenting is like medicine. It's a practice. You do your best to get it right. But these are just my thoughts. Of course, Stace, I love to hear back from you. I love to get your feedback. If anybody else took the time to watch this video to 23 minutes and some change, I apologize. Sometimes the subject just goes that long. I don't care about the likes. I don't care about the subscriptions. I don't care about the notifications. I'm not in it for the monetization. I'm just trying to potentially reach people that I don't physically already know and trying to increase conversation. Ideally, I'd like to have the conversation on this channel, but if something I said causes you to have conversations with others, if something I talk about causes you to potentially indulge in a conversation with somebody you don't necessarily agree with, then that works too. That serves the ultimate purpose. Additionally, be on the lookout if you're a geeky, nerdy person like me. I love to get geeky and nerdy. Stace, I think you might want to consider having your own little sidebar thing for where you are a fan of something I'm not currently with, so that maybe we can find a way to entertain all aspects. I have yet to entertain any of the live action Anne Rice stuff that's on television where I think you have. So, to be discussed further. If it's not something you're comfortable with, so be it. Don't need to force you into anything. But for anybody else, I'm more interested in the comments, and if you leave a comment, I will read it, react, and respond. And if you do, I appreciate it. Till next time, you're awesome. Boop-a-doop.